Welcome to In Tune. I'm your co-host, Matt Rector, an aspiring luthier from Baltimore, Maryland.
And I'm your other co-host, Ethan Morset, a music producer and founder of Blue Haven Music based in Minnesota.
Our goal is to provide value to enterprising musicians, artists, and craftspeople by sharing our conversations and the lessons we've learned along the way.
If you like our content, help us out by following us and giving us a positive rating on whatever platform you listen to podcasts. Tune in for new episodes on the first and third Wednesday of each month. This is episode 53, and today we are going to talk about comparing yourself to others and why you should do way more of it. Just kidding. We're going to just talk about how Matt is better than I am because it's so obvious, but we've never really talked about it.
Duh.
No, the idea or the motivation behind this topic is I recently went to a conference. If you listen to the last episode, and you should, you'll know that I went to a conference recently, and there were a lot of musicians there, and there were a lot of really talented musicians there. Not that I have no talent whatsoever, but you know, when you hear people that have been that are doing this for a living, it's easy to hear their music and feel, at least for me, feel a little discouraged because it kind of highlights the distance between you and them. And so I've been kind of following up for the conference and listening to people's music, just to show, you know, my kind of typical pattern is I check out their website, I listen to some of their music, and then I try to put together a personal email to send to them. So that's why I'm listening to their music. You know, so I can say, oh, I really like this track, or I liked what you did here. So there's been a few times where I have had a little bit of the imposter syndrome going on when I've listened to somebody else's music and I'm like, hey, we should collaborate. But secretly in the back of my head, I'm like, but what they're better at this than me, or they're better at this specific thing than me. Like I have some of those things that pop up. So I figured it is, so I've been just thinking about this a lot and figured it'd be a good topic to talk about just the idea of comparing yourself to others and then maybe brainstorming tactics to get around that, or just kind of analyze why we, or at least I, do that and why it's not always a great thing to do. So that was kind of the motivation. I don't know, Matt, do you have any like initial thoughts that come to mind when you think about, well, I guess maybe my first question is, do you struggle with this? Do you struggle with imposter syndrome? Do you struggle with comparing yourself to other luthiers or other YouTubers or influencers, and you're just like, man, like they're so much farther along, like I suck, like that kind of stuff, you know?
That's what's always going through my head is just, I suck.
What a good thing to be having going through your head.
No, I mean, I do struggle with it sometimes. You know, I'd be lying if I said that I didn't. I don't think comparison is always bad. I think it's important, especially when you are trying to have a business, sell a product or service. You know, you have to be competitive, or at least offer something that is worth it to the client or the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that means you have to really be honest with yourself and think about, what am I offering that, you know, the next guy can't or isn't doing? Or what do I bring to the table? So I don't think comparison is in and of itself a bad thing.
Right.
but it can definitely become a bad thing. And I think that problem has definitely been compounded by things like social media, where you see this curated content that isn't really reflective or isn't really a good reflection of the whole picture, but that's all you see, and that's all because that's what they want you to see, right? That's what they've chosen to put out there on social media.
Right.
Yeah, so I do struggle with this. One thing you mentioned, and this might be a little bit of a tangent. You said with imposter syndrome, meeting people and you think they're really talented, and I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast before, but actually the word, like, calling someone talented is almost, I know that it's meant as a compliment, but to me, sometimes it can get on my nerves. And here's why. Because
Matt's mad
I
at
think
me.
No, I'm not, but I knew what you meant, but I think, well, I've had this plenty of times, right? I meet someone and I play some music for them or something, or they go, "Oh my gosh, this is going to sound like I'm bragging," but then like, "Oh my gosh, you're so talented." And they're like, "I could never do that." And to me, that bothers me because I used to teach guitar lessons, so like I hate when people say I could never do that, because I think that if you focus on learning and improving your skills, a lot of people could do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that the statement like, "Oh, you're so talented, I could never do that," just sort of implies like, "Oh, you're naturally gifted," like,
Right. You're
and
lucky, not hardworking.
And I think a lot of times, to me, that sort of discredits all of the hours, countless hours that, a musician, for example, puts into honing their craft. And so I know when people say you're very talented, it's usually meant as a compliment,
Mm-hmm.
but it does rub me the wrong way sometimes when people almost use it as an excuse for like why you are good at something and I'm not. And it's like, well, actually there's a lot of hard work put into that too. It's not just, people are more prone to being naturally gifted in some areas. I mean, that's definitely true, but that's not really the only reason. And that kind of rubs me the wrong way sometimes. But oh, you were going to say something?
No, I mean, you're finishing a thought, so go ahead.
The reason I kind of went off on that tangent is because I think that there is a tendency among people when they're comparing themselves to have that mentality.
Mm-hmm.
To look at someone and go, "Man, they're just so talented, and I could never do that." And what they're seeing is that 30 seconds of curated content on Instagram, and they're using that to form their entire opinion about that person's abilities, and also using that to judge their own abilities from comparison. And when you do that, you're not giving yourself a fighting chance. You're not, if you're starting out in something, of course the, guy who's a professional musician or whatever, who's been doing it for 20 years or however long, is going to seem so far off from you, right?
Yep.
Of course. But if you start to put in a little bit of work and you do it consistently, you'd be surprised how much progress you can make when you're consistent about it, and how much your skills can improve. People tend to get really gung-ho and really motivated for maybe a few weeks, and then they kind of drop off. But when people are consistent, for 1 year, 2 years, a few years, you might be amazed with yourself, by how much you can really improve.
Right.
And so that was kind of where I was going with that, you know, in terms of comparison. Try not to look at other people and just look at it as a, oh, they're talented and I'm not kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. And like, since we kind of went that direction with talent, which I think it is very interwoven into comparison, right? Um, but because I think part of imposter syndrome, or like part of whatever you want to call it, is like you seeing yourself as less than somebody else, right? Like not able to do something. And like the talent, like no one is born, people are born with natural abilities, but those abilities still have to be developed and you have to put work into them. Like if Whitney Houston didn't like practice singing whatsoever, no one would have even known she had the ability that she had, right? That ability still had to be developed with a lot of work. So there's no real such thing as just raw talent that doesn't require any effort whatsoever. I mean, there is, but to turn it into something truly great or something really good, it does require work. And there's just no way really around that. You're not, again, like Justin Bieber wasn't born with just being able to songwrite and sing and, write catchy songs and all that kind of stuff. He had to work on it, right? So yeah, I think that's an important reminder. But yeah, I think that you brought up another good point. Is a huge part of, well, I think you brought up several good points, but I think a huge part of comparison, and like healthy comparison, is recognizing where that person is on their journey compared to where you are. Because if I think you saw this, so this will probably sound familiar, but I did an Instagram post kind of about this a little bit, but like if someone is 10 years in their journey and you're 2 years in their journey, like it's not a fair comparison, right? Like you might listen to their music or you might look at their guitar work and be like, oh man, like I suck compared to them. Like I put all this work in, but I'm still not as good as them. Well, they have 8 years on you. Like I know time is not everything. People develop at different speeds, but they still have a lot of time on you. And like, it's not a fair comparison to like, you can't compare apples to apples in that case, right? It's not apples to apples. And I don't know. I think like that's a helpful reminder too, is like question, okay, well, I don't know how long, like most of the time you're probably not going to know the people that you're comparing to. You're not going to know how long they've been doing it. Right. So I think some of it has to come down to, rather than jumping to conclusions that they've had the same amount of time as you and they're just better at it, rather than jumping to that conclusion, taking a step back and being like, hold on, I don't know how long this person's been working at it. They could have been doing it double the amount of time with me. I had no idea. So jumping to that conclusion that, oh, we've had the same amount of time and they're better at me, I'm never going to get to that point, is just so damaging and unhelpful. Because who knows, maybe by the time you're 10 years into your journey, maybe you'll be farther than they are. You don't really, there's no way to really know that. So yeah, I think you're, just that's a big thing too, is just remembering that it's you have to do comparison well. I guess it depends on what the motive of your comparison is, but like to do it well, like you really should know what you're comparing against the other thing, right? And I feel like part of that is knowing, like in this case, how long have they been doing it? How much experience do they have? What opportunities have they had that maybe you haven't had yet? I don't know. I just think that's an important piece of it. I think the other thing you said is comparison doesn't have to be bad, right? Obviously, we're talking about it as a bad thing right now, where, oh, you're using it to almost be self-discouraging and like give up. But comparison can also be, like you said, a positive thing where you can use it to make yourself better, or like I mean, the reality is you and I are using comparison all the time in a positive way, right? We are comparing what other people are posting on social media and then trying to learn from that and apply some of it ourselves. Comparing my music to Linkin Park music and figuring out how could I make my music sound more like Linkin Park if that's what I want to do, right? Like it is a valuable tool. It's just maintaining that mindset that maintaining the mindset of, I feel like at the core of it is just remembering that talent is developed. Your skill set is developed over time. Everybody's skill set is developed over time. So just because someone has a more polished sound than you doesn't mean that you're never going to get there, and doesn't mean you're not going to get there in the same amount of time it took them to get there, you know?
Or maybe it takes you longer, or not as long. Or maybe your destination ends up being a little bit different, and you measure success differently. I mean,
Right.
There's lots of different ways that can go. Yeah. So comparison is can definitely be used as a useful tool, but it can become something unhealthy for sure. It can become jealousy, potentially, you know, and it can also become an excuse, basically, oh, well, they're just more talented than me. Like, I'm just, really to me, what that is just someone's fear of failure, of not being good enough. And then the excuse becomes, oh, well, they're just, more naturally gifted.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really a cop out, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And it's just so funny though, because like maybe it's easier for you to see this when maybe it's easier for you to notice when you're comparing yourself to other people, but sometimes like these things all make sense, but I still find myself like having these types of thoughts sneak up on me and not paying attention to them, and before you know it, I'm feeling discouraged and all that kind of stuff.
I have days like that too. So it's not, I mean, I get that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but yeah, no. I have days like that as well.
But yeah, I think that the other place that comparison can be positive is self-comparison, right? Like where this can be kind of another more like uplifting way of looking at it is comparing where you are now to where you were a year ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever. And if you've been working at your craft, you're almost guaranteed to be much farther along, right? Obviously, it depends on how disciplined you've been, but like, I know for me, 5 years ago, I was in a totally different spot, right? Like I wasn't even trying to go. I couldn't even fathom at that point probably going to like networking conferences and all that kind of stuff. I wasn't even thinking about music and television, all that stuff. So like so many things have changed, and I can feel good about that. right? Because that means progress. And then on top of that, I think you can also kind of be like, okay, where am I at right now and where do I want to be? So it kind of that's like goal setting, right? Comparing where you're at right now to where you really want to be. I think is another way to positively use comparison versus negatively using it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I don't. It's just funny that I know a lot of people struggle with it, and it's funny that you keep falling into the same traps, even though you know these things. Like even though people repeat it, like you'll be on social media and you'll see, you know, like I'll post on social media I ran a marathon, and someone will be like, "Oh, I could never do that." Like I'm so this or I'm so that, and that person's just got their health together and all these things. But like the reality is, like you said, it's hard. Like there was a lot of work that went behind that nobody sees. You're not posting your daily update videos about, hey, I ran 8 miles today. Hey, I ran 12 miles today. Like it went okay. Like you only see a lot of times the direct result of all of that hard work. So I don't know. I need when it comes to like the music stuff, like I need to listen to other people's music and like be able to assess, is their music better or worse, or not worse, but like is their music better than mine in some way?
They suck.
They suck. I'm the freaking goat. But like assessing, yeah, like being, like you said in the beginning, being honest, where are they better at what I'm doing? And then maybe also assessing where am I doing better, right? And then using that information to actually improve yourself and have faith that you can improve yourself and get to that point. I think is, I don't know, the much better way to look at it.
Yeah, it's interesting because our respective fields are very different. They're both sort of music adjacent.
Yep.
Music production and making musical instruments. But for me, sometimes I find it hard to differentiate and find a niche.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when I compare myself to others, I feel like no matter which direction I go, there's someone else out there who's already doing it better. And that's
I hear you.
Sort of a challenge for me. And I think I'm maybe a little bit envious of, I guess, you have made music in lots of different styles. Mm-hmm. And I think that with music production, if you were to look at the way music was recorded 100 years ago versus today, I mean, it's pretty vastly different.
That's entirely different.
Yeah, right? Whereas in a lot of ways, I think with things that are sort of tied to traditional crafts, mm-hmm. Building musical instruments, I mean, the way that stringed instruments are built, yes, there have been lots of things that have changed, but the fundamental things about it haven't really changed in, I mean, hundreds or even thousands of years.
Right.
And so for me, sometimes I find it hard to find ways to be different and innovative and unique and have a niche. And, there are people who build historical reproductions or that build certain styles of instruments that are representative of, like, say, Martin guitars from, pre-World War II, and they only try to build instruments that are basically, reproducing those. And then there's also people who are doing crazy modern things. And I guess I don't quite fall in either of those camps. I would lean a little bit more traditional in my designs. I'm not necessarily. I've seen some crazy designs out there, and some of them are really cool and innovative. But I've also seen ones where I sort of scratch my head and go, yeah, but how does that improve the tone? How does that improve the playability? How does that provide a real benefit to the player and or the musician? And sometimes I think there are people who are just doing these crazy things sort of for the sake of being different.
Yep.
And I don't want to do that either, because I don't really think there's a lot of merit for me. I mean, there is merit in experimentation for sure, but I've seen some things where I just look at it and I think, I don't really think that there's any real benefit to doing it that way. It's just weird.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to have just wacky instruments. I want my instruments to stand the test of time, and there's a certain timeless quality to, like, a classic Martin guitar, right? Or a classic Gibson or whatever it is. And then how do you make something timeless but that's also different? Right?
Yeah.
That's how do you make something new?
I mean, somebody had to do it at some point, right? Like,
yeah, correct.
I don't know if you,
but
I don't know if, like,
that's the challenge I face, I guess. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I hear you. Like, I don't know if, like, let's say a Fender Stratocaster is timeless, right? Because it's such a popular guitar that gets used over and over again. Like, at some point that had to be new, right? Obviously, every guitar that's ever been built is an iteration on something that came before it. So, like, so it's not entirely new, right? It's just tweaks to what was already there. But, like, that had to come at some point and be innovative, right? And then it became timeless. So, like, I don't know. I hear you. I struggle with that too. Our crafts are different because mine's more digital. Yours is still very much in the physical world. I mean, I play real instruments. It's not like I don't, but it is different. But, like, I do still struggle with how am I different? It is a lot of threading the needle. Like, it's how do you remain unique but also relevant? And I think it's become, at least it seems like it's even harder now because of how connected we are. Because now you can't just be like the person that does this in this local area, right? Because it's a global world now. So I totally understand that. I'm not really sure what my sound is or anything. I just write what I think I need to write at that moment in time, but I hear you. Yeah, you constantly hear messages from people being like, you need to do this, this, and this because that's what's trendy and that's what will, that's what everyone else is doing, right? Like, you got to do the template. The template is proven, but then you have the other side of it where it's like, no, you need to stand out. How do you stand out if you're doing what everybody else is doing? So it's conflicting information, and it's figuring out how to, like, meld those two ideas into something. Sometimes, I mean, let's be honest, like, well, let's say like the Fender Stratocaster, like, maybe it's just a few tweaks that need to be made for it to be innovative and cutting edge and something different. Maybe there's just something slightly different that you can do. Maybe it doesn't need to be this drastically different instrument. Maybe it just continues to build on the instrument that already is there. I don't know what that is, to be honest, and I still struggle with it. For me too, like, what is my sound? But I think the other thing too is maybe I think you being you makes it unique at least a little bit, especially like when you're talking about content creation like YouTube and like Instagram. Your personality will come through as unique compared to other YouTubers and other Instagram creators. And you probably, like you said, if you're building your own standards, there will probably be side effects from that make your designs have specific things that not all guitars have. And then I also wonder, is being perfectly unique a requirement? Or do you just have to be someone that, like, if you have 3 luthiers in the world that do the same type of thing, but they're the only 3 luthiers that do it, isn't there enough demand for that type of instrument? You know?
Yeah, there's truth to that, because I mean, I've thought about that as well, because the reality is there are plenty of builders who are basically making, you know, Stratocaster copies and Telecaster copies and, you know, Les Paul copies and Martin D28 copies and, you know, Gibson J45 copies. Like, there are lots of luthiers who are making instruments that are more, you know, there's going to be some variation, but are more or less inspired by that basic formula.
Mm-hmm.
And there are plenty of them out there that are well-known and successful luthiers that are just following that format. You know, so I don't think you necessarily have to do something wildly different. But I don't know. It just can be a little tough to find like a niche, I guess.
Yeah. I just think that, I mean, I think that it can be a little discouraging when you're so hyper focused on having a niche, and you're like, everything's already been done, which, by the way, I don't think everything's already been done.
I don't either,
but I think that perfect uniqueness might be slightly overrated, right? Like, what if your guitars, just, I don't know, what if your guitars, what if it's how you run your business that's unique? Or what if, you know, like, I don't know, like what if you were able to become the go-to luthier for like the Baltimore area, right? Like, you wouldn't necessarily, what is this came to mind, but like, would you rather, it's the whole like Instagram or like artist idea, that would you rather have 100,000 followers or 1,000 true fans? You know what I mean? Like that whole idea that like you don't need massive amounts of people to support your lifestyle. You just need to have those loyal customers that prefer you, right? And not like, just like for me, my music will not speak to everybody, but hopefully it speaks to some people, right? And those are the people that want my music, and they put it in shows and those types of things. So I think it's like, yeah, I think it's important to try to be unique and put your spin on it. But like, I think we hear that message so often that, oh, be unique, but also don't be unique. Like, don't do your own thing, but do your own thing. Like, I think sometimes maybe uniqueness is valuable, but sometimes it's maybe it's overblown a little bit, as like, you need to be unique and no one has ever done this before, right? I don't know if that's true. I think you can still have success without being massively innovative.
I guess. I think the challenge for me is if I'm making something that's a little bit more of a traditional design, I kind of feel like I'm competing against the already well-established names.
Mhm.
And what's, more challenging too is I don't know how I would compare this to music production, but like with musical instruments, a lot of musicians are, I don't know, creatures of habit. You look at the way the demand for certain instruments, like and the combinations of materials. For example, like a Martin D28 style guitar that has rosewood back and sides and a spruce top, and almost every major guitar manufacturer makes something like that. And there's a reason why. And there are lots of people out there who have done alternative materials and or maybe tried to push more sustainable materials, but musicians still want that. And some of that is tradition. And the other aspect of that is if you're a musician and you grow up watching your favorite guitar hero play a Gibson Les Paul or a Fender Stratocaster or, one of those iconic instruments, a lot of musicians, they sort of lust after those instruments. They're aspirational objects for them. And so even if I could make an instrument that is similar to, say, a Fender Strat that maybe is arguably even better, or has some great new features, they might still just want to choose the Fender because that's, that means something to them. And it might be a totally sentimental thing, but something like that is hard to overcome. And I think that a lot of musical instruments, often do have tremendous sentimental value and aren't necessarily always made. Those purchases aren't necessarily always made just based on, I guess, completely normal. Well, I don't know if I want to say normal, but I guess just on features alone.
Yeah, the playing field isn't exactly even if you're just strictly looking at you're fighting a brand, right? You're fighting a brand that's been well developed, that has a reputation, and you could have all the exact same specs, but because Gibson Les Paul is known for this, this, and this, it's going to be way harder for you to convince people to buy your version of that instrument with similar specs.
Like for example, I guess we're picking on Fender today, but and I want to be very clear. Like I grew up playing a Strat. I love Fender Strats. I love the Fender brand and the history there. And I owned an American-made Fender Strat for a while. I ended up selling it. And I might buy another one. I'm not really much of an electric guitar builder. I mean, I'm more interested in building acoustic instruments. I also worked in a repair shop where I saw a lot of instruments, both low end and high end. And, I'm not trying to disparage any brand here. This isn't just a Fender issue. This is an issue for a lot of the quote unquote high end American, major American, big corporation, American guitar manufacturers. But I was really sort of shocked to see some of the poor quality control on some of those instruments that were pretty expensive, and I know that for some of those instruments, I'm capable of building something that, at least how it came to me from the client, who may have purchased it recently, I know I'm capable of building instruments that are better than some of those, or doing fret work that is better than, how some of those came out of the factory. And despite that, though, I know that I'm also fighting, like you're saying, fighting against that um sort of sentimental attachment to, well, I want a Telecaster, and it's got to be a Fender. Can't be a Telecaster style guitar. Like it's got to be a real Fender. And that's just something that I think is a little bit difficult to overcome sometimes with what I'm doing, especially before you've really built a name for yourself. Once you're known as a well-known, well-respected luthier, it becomes easier. But when you're starting out, it's really tough because if you have two comparable products, one is from someone, that is completely unknown, and one is from a brand that has, a world-renowned heritage and legacy. I mean, come on, that's like probably a pretty easy choice for most people.
Yeah, I think it depends though. I think there's other factors like price, and I think for some people, you can make the argument that the Fender is made by a machine, whereas your guitars are made by human hands and have the attention to detail that a human would have over a machine, right? And that results in overall a better instrument that is more sustainable and can be maintained for a lot longer. So I feel like, you could push that angle. Like I hear what you're saying. It's an uphill battle. It always is when you're trying to break into a market. But like there's probably specific ways to phrase it to make it sound like a more appealing product than to something that's already out there. Would you rather have something that like you could even compare yourself like typical guitars that come off from the factory, the fretwork is sometimes off, and the highlighting what makes them, highlighting those things that make it poor quality, right? And you can be like, my guitars don't have those problems because I do it myself. I don't rely on a machine to do that. I don't know. I feel like there's maybe marketing tricks that you could do for that. It's still going to be an uphill battle, but you got to use every trick that you can in the bag to level the playing fields, I feel like. And it's not like that's a lie. It's not.
That's true. I do try to lean into the whole handcrafted thing, but I also am not opposed to machines, and I try not to go down that rabbit hole sometimes because the truth is, like, CNC machines are capable a lot of times of producing parts to such a high level of accuracy and standard that they'd be more consistent than what a human could probably ever possibly do. For some things. Now, there are other things where, yes, I think the attention to detail of someone doing things, by hand or I guess for the whole process rather than like a kind of factory assembly line type of thing, I do think make a difference. But there are other times, like, for example, again, I guess we're picking on Fender today. I don't know why, but solid body electric guitars where, you have a bolt-on neck, like, I don't necessarily see a ton of merit in making all the bodies by hand. You can have a CNC machine batch out hundreds of bodies from, blanks of wood, and they're all going to come out consistent and accurate. And the only thing I would say with that is maybe when you're doing it by hand, you maybe do a little bit better job of wood selection and grain orientation. You're probably going to pay attention to those things a little bit more closely. But in terms of sheer manufacturing quality, I don't know. We're kind of going off in a different tangent that's specific to guitar making now. But
I mean, you could do custom guitar builds where you're like, I can make a Fender style Strat, but I can work with you on customizations to it that you might not be able to get from the manufacturer.
Yeah, and I guess I'm trying to specialize more in acoustic instruments. I'm not really interested in building electric instruments, but
yeah, the same thing for acoustics though, you know. Have letting them have a little bit more. I mean, obviously some of that still depends on reputation because they're not going to want to shell out money, but I don't know, maybe there's like some Baltimore artists that you could work with to like use your instrument in live performances or something like that to get some exposure, right?
that's interesting because I've heard mixed things about that. And it's kind of like when you got started, when you were talking about, providing free services.
Yeah.
Because I've heard both sides of the coin where people say, get your instruments in the hands of artists, and then other people say never give your instruments out for free. And it's,
what if you did something in between? What if it's a discounted price for it? Somewhere in between where it's let's say the quality of a Martin guitar, but it's less expensive because again, you're shaving off some of that money for exposure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing.
I
Like
don't
it's at least one strategy for trying to get your name out there a little bit more. Or could you be that performer? Could you do some like, no, you play guitar. Could you come up with some like fun, catchy, like hooky social media content with your guitars that could draw attention to it, right? Like I feel like looking to just get that kindling going, like lighting that fire a little bit. Well, why couldn't it be you, or sure. Me or whatever? Like maybe a few years from now I have more success and I could use one of your guitars in a few tracks and say it gets picked up on a show, and then you could be like, my guitars have been used in compositions in CSI Miami or something like that, like you could say that.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I think we've gotten a little off topic and we've kind of focused more on Luthery stuff. But
I think it's all good.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to discuss about comparison? Healthy comparison, unhealthy comparison, all of the above.
Not really. I guess be fair to yourself and be kind to yourself. I think, the only other thing I really had is, we can tend, or at least I know there's plenty of people out there that they can tend to be their own worst enemy and underestimate their abilities and overestimate other people's abilities. So like, be fair to yourself and be kind to yourself. Make sure that you're being level-headed when you're comparing. That's all I got.
Yeah. It's good advice.
Alrighty.
And my advice about Luthery is quit. I'm just kidding.
You heard it from Matt.
No. If I had any advice for instrument makers, it would be to just get in the shop and start doing things. And don't worry about what other people are doing. Build your own instruments, make them how you want. And if they're the type of instruments that you want to play, there's probably someone else out there who also would like to play them.
Boom. Mic drop. All right, that all you got?
That is all that I have.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, stay tuned.